You're not just carrying over what you had from a previous year and saying,
this is what
how
we
we're
did.
going to...
Right. We did this last year, and so we're going to continue to do it this way. But inviting the new people in and saying, hey, this is what we've done. What would you like to do? Or can we involve things? Isn't it just like starting your classroom?
It really is. That's exactly what I was thinking about. We were talking about how to establish your classroom, and this is really the exact same thing. Living in a neighborhood where new people are coming in, right, all of the time. And if you have a pretty vibrant community in your neighborhood, hopefully you're welcoming these new people and saying, we're so glad to have you in the neighborhood. Here are some things that we do traditionally, but I want to hear what you're interested in doing. Thank you so much for joining us today. We are so glad to have you back here with us. Today, Lisa and I are going to talk about collaboration in the classroom. So we're going to be focusing on partnerships between teachers, parents, students, all of the things that make a school community within that classroom. So from enhancing dynamics through teacher collaboration to involving parents as active participants in their children's learning journey, we're going to be talking about how we can do all these things to empower ourselves, our students, and even our parents to support a positive learning experience for their children. So thank you. Welcome to Education Uncharted. I'm Amanda.
And I'm Lisa.
And let's dive right in, Lisa. So let's start by talking about how teachers can be successful in collaboration. There are certain schools that really support teacher collaboration through PLCs and other solutions like mentoring. And then there are schools that kind of, they're not quite there yet. They're letting teachers work these things out on their own. Let's start by talking about how you can run a successful professional learning community through teacher collaboration.
Yeah. So first, I think there's a couple of elements that you need in order to have a successful PLC. You need time, you need space to collaborate with, and a big one is you need trust.
It's definitely a huge part of the puzzle is the ability to, or the comfort that is built when you're able to trust the people that are in your group, right? And sometimes we're put into PLCs where either we don't know the people well enough to know if we can trust them, or maybe we're feeling a little bit uncomfortable because we do know them, or at least, one or two individuals where we feel like that trust has somehow been eroded from past experiences. So I think that maybe what we want to do is kind of talk about how do we build trust in these small communities of teacher learning groups, right? What do we do to help ensure in a new group or help to build trust in a group that maybe has been struggling in the past? I feel like the first thing is to recognize that you're there to help build each other's experience. You're not there to iterate on what's maybe been done poorly in the past, but instead to talk about how you can bring your skills and your knowledge to support others, and to kind of grow the group from a positive perspective instead of from a perspective of deficit.
Right. And I think when we think about just a PLC is a community. And so just like communities have people coming in and out, we need to take it upon ourselves to draw people in and work to build that trust for the new people. I can remember one of my first years of teaching, starting in a new school, starting in a new state. I joined a school that historically didn't have a lot of turnover. So the staff had been there for 15, 20 years at a time.
And you were new.
I was new. I was a second year teacher. I had done 1 year of teaching in a different state, and I came over. there happened to be about 6 of us that started at the same time. So I'm not sure what the turnover reason was, but 6 of us started at the same time. So we all were thrust into established communities. So my co-teachers had been teaching together for ages. And then all of a sudden there's this new kid on the block that comes in. Mm-hmm. So it was really hard. It's really hard because you don't want to step on their toes in what they have established, but also you're coming in with your own ideas and your own previous experiences. So you want to contribute and be a part of things. You don't want to just say, I'll do it exactly the way you're doing it, but let's reform a new community. And I think that's really important, that when you start a new community or when you have a new year, you're starting something brand new each time.
You're maybe reestablishing some norms or newly establishing norms, right? Like you're not just carrying over what you had from a previous year and saying, this is how we're going to.
Right. We did this last year. And so we're going to continue to do it this way. But inviting the new people in and saying, hey, this is what we've done. What would you like to do? Or can we involve things? Isn't it just like starting your classroom?
It really is. That's exactly what I was thinking about. It wasn't that long ago we were talking about how to establish your classroom. And this is really the exact same thing. I'm also thinking about how, living in a neighborhood where new people are coming in, right, all of the time. And if you have a pretty vibrant community in your neighborhood, hopefully you're welcoming these new people and saying, we're so glad to have you in the neighborhood. Here are some things that we do traditionally, but I want to hear what you're interested in doing. If you have a block party, you want to make sure you invite them to that block party, but you also want to say, hey, if you have an idea for something that you want to incorporate into the block party, or if you have another event that you want to schedule so that you can, or you want us all to work together to create so that you can, bring your own flavor to the community, like let us know. We're here. We're open to that change. And it's the same thing, right? This is another kind of community where we're looking for new ideas. Hopefully we can be open to them and, recognize that things change, right? Things don't stay the same. Communities are constantly changing and turning over. And a lot of times it's for the better.
Right. Absolutely.
So let's say that you are in a PLC. You've gotten into the first few months of school and their conflicts are brewing. Or maybe it's the same PLC. You've been with these same group of people and you're coming back to another school year of conflict, right? Of collaboration that just doesn't get there because something's going awry. Navigating that conflict when you have to work with these people on a day-to-day basis can be really stressful and tough. Like I can't even tell you how many teachers I've heard say, the PLC is supposed to be a place where I feel like I can grow and collaborate and learn and, make my teaching community and the opportunities that I can provide to my students better. But I just end up walking out of there upset or angry or crying or so anxious that I don't even know what to do with myself. So what can we do as individuals, right? Like, obviously, we can try to be the person that is the open, responsive, ready to take on new ideas. But if we can't control everyone in our group, right? So what if we're the person that's walking away feeling upset? How can we navigate that?
Yeah, that's hard. I've had some amazing teams that I've worked with. And then I've had some teams that really did not mesh. And I found that the teams that didn't mesh well were the ones that were excessively large or the ones that had, and sometimes it was the same teams that had established leaders. And I think we need to take a look at what it means to be a leader of a team, because those two words are kind of at odds with each other, right? We're leaders of a team, but the leader is part of that team. It's just one voice. And a lot of times there is a team lead, right? There's a team lead, but that's usually just the conduit of information, the messenger from the admin that says, these are the topics you guys need to discuss. This is the timekeeper. You need to take notes and we're going to report back. So that way you don't have 8 people on a team reporting back to the administrator. But that leader does not mean that they're the boss.
Right. So if
Right.
you are designated as team lead, the first thing you can do is say, I am going to distribute the information,
Mhm.
but I am the messenger,
I'm the messenger.
right? I'm not the one that is making all of the choices for this group. So being open and recognizing that just because for whatever reason you've been given this role, that doesn't mean that you are the boss.
You're the boss.
Right?
Right. I mean, we do
Yeah.
this in our classrooms. And again, it's so similar to our classrooms. What we go through as teachers and what we encourage with our classrooms and our students is pretty much the same. I mean, when we have discussion groups, you have different roles and different responsibilities, but we're expecting every student to contribute. Every student is going to be graded equally for their share of work, right? So one person is not taking on all the work. That's not a fair situation. And the same thing should happen in our PLCs. One person is not taking on the work. So as a leader, not only are you not the boss of everyone, you are not responsible for all the work in that group. Everyone equally is responsible for that work. So you know what? This is a great time to delegate, to say, I'm not going to do this. I don't have the bandwidth to do everything. I have so much else on my plate. So how about you take over this part, or you take the notes today, or you are going to be leading this part of the discussion. You're going to be leading this part of the discussion, and communicating. We tell our students, communicate your needs. As team members and as PLCs, we need to communicate our needs with each other, both in good ways and bad ways. Start with gratitude. Thank you for helping me with this. I need more help.
Right. Or thank you for being a part of this group and recognizing that we all are equal members.
Right.
Right. Because I think it's very easy for the leader of the group to also be the one that walks away feeling completely overwhelmed. It's so easy for everyone else to be like, oh, thank goodness I am not the team lead because I can't do all of that. They shouldn't be, right? They shouldn't be doing all of that. And you then can be a help by recognizing and taking on some of those roles. I feel like that's kind of part of being successful in collaboration, is recognizing that we should be spreading the opportunity as well as the tasks pretty evenly.
Also, individually, we need to recognize our own biases. This is something that really happens in schools, and I've been on both sides of it, where a new teacher comes in and you have 20 years of experience and you discredit the new teacher because they haven't been there. You haven't done it. You don't know what's going on. This is your first time setting up a classroom. This is your first time doing everything. And so the more experienced teachers tend to discount the contributions of the younger teachers. And I know, I mean, I'm honest. Like, I'll look at a teacher and I'm like, oh, you got lots of great ideas, but that's not going to work. Right? But we have to stop ourselves. We have to stop ourselves from doing that and saying, you know what? I may not think that's going to work, but you need to try that. How about just try it? Bring it to us and I'll try it with you and see what happens. And we're going to cut and paint in the first day of school in kindergarten. Probably not going to work. That was actually my idea. I thought it would be
Sure.
a great idea to paint the first week of school with kindergartners who didn't know how to use paint. But it was fun. But you have to try it. And
Sure.
you don't always want to just take everyone else's ideas because you want to do it yourself. Learn by experience. So let's advocate for learning by experience and accepting and saying, even if in the back of your head, this is not going to work out, maybe they have a trick, or maybe they've learned something new because they just came out of teacher prep.
Absolutely.
And they've got a new idea, because things are continuously changing and we have to be open to this. Maybe we can learn something new. Of course we can learn something new, right?
It's the yes and mentality. Unless it's danger, right? Unless this is going to, cause harm in a physical or emotional way. Like the answer is yes. And how can I help you? Or yes, and I'll bring the paint that won't stain the desks.
Or
right?
add soap to the paint.
Yes.
Here's a trick that I know. You want to do it, go
Yes.
for it. But here's something I've learned and let me help you with that.
Or yes, and maybe try it the first week of October after kids know how to hold on to the paintbrush, right? Like, so not just saying that's a bad idea,
Right.
like you're done. It's I think that's fantastic. Here's something that I learned that might save you,
Mm-hmm.
but also I'm here to support you however you need.
And then after it, reflect on it together. Be open to reflecting. Say, okay, you tried it. You wanted to do a debate. You had never done a debate in class. You tried it. It failed miserably. Let's talk about it. What went well? What didn't go well? Because you're going to want to do it again. And if you just assume that you've completely failed and there's no recovery, then you haven't learned anything. But this is where our PLCs come into play. Now, let's talk about it. Have you tried something different? When they started fighting each other and crying, I felt uncomfortable. I didn't know how to stop the chaos. What would you have done?
Stop the chaos. Oh my gosh. But like, listen,
Again,
I feel
personal experience.
Yes. But this is what PLCs are meant for, right? The whole point of this is not to continue to do the same thing that you've always done. The point is to push yourselves into new spaces, right? And maybe that is stepping up and becoming that, like that mentor space. Like, okay, I had this happen to me also. I'm so glad that you tested out something new. And the solution that I found was this. Could that work for your classroom? And let's have a conversation. Otherwise, you're just stagnant and there's no point. You're wasting your time even meeting, right? So instead of sitting within your comfort zone, instead of having one person running the program, instead of basically shutting down any idea that you've had experience negatively with, it's time to kind of, think about how you can open up and how everyone can be a mentor to each other.
So another unnamed PLC, another learning community to talk about is the communities that we make with our parents, because that's a very important part of the collaborative process, is bringing in our parents to be professionals and community members with us. They know their students the best. They know them so much better than we know them. And so why wouldn't we be working with the parents? So talk to me about some of the challenges or benefits of forming the communities with the parents.
So I taught in inner city schools where many parents their availability was not, it wasn't there. Like, they were working many times. Parents were working 2 or 3 jobs, or their shifts kind of overlapped with the time that we would traditionally have them coming into school to either help during the school day or support extracurricular things. And I recognize that can be a big blocker when you're trying to, recognize that parents are also educators, right? Because their kids are with them so much, and we want to kind of form a bond, right? We want to be partners in their children's growth. So one of the things that we really tried to do is make sure that we were scheduling events or opportunities to connect at multiple times of the day. So instead of planning everything for like a 4:00 meet, which lots of parents have trouble making, right? Sometimes we would create before school programming where parents could come in and participate, like from an 8:00 to a 9:00 hour, or even a 7 to 8, depending on the beginning of the school year. The school day. And then sometimes there were things that we could do much later in the evening where it might be after a sports practice and parents could come in then and participate. It's definitely when you're working in spaces where parents are, their timing is tight and their availability is tough. It can be something that is really hard to plan around. But one way that we really can kind of try to draw them in is through more technology, right? More interactive solutions. So having the opportunity to create message boards or to provide parents opportunities to share what they know on like a Facebook page, right? Where you can share and reshare and comment and kind of develop the community in that way is also super helpful.
And for the parents that don't necessarily have access to computers, most parents have access to phones.
Exactly.
So keeping up with text messaging apps like Remind, something like that.
Amazing.
Right. So you can send a quick message and say, hey, we've got a test tomorrow. Here's a picture from the class today, because that's something that parents want to see. They want to see their children happy and smiling and working. You know, the kids come home and say, the parents say, what did you do today? And they're nothing. Well, clearly you did something. Right? Clearly did something. So we can share the experiences. And just that is bringing the parents into the community. So now it's more one-sided in terms of messaging, but they can then respond back if they are able to, which means also, here's another thing that I was just thinking about, is being able to communicate with the parents.
100%. That was actually going to be my next point.
Right.
Sometimes you are teaching in a community or you have a classroom of students where there is a communication barrier, right? There's that language barrier, and it can be hard to overcome if you don't have somebody who can help translate over the phone or during a face-to-face meeting, or if you are, if you're pushing out communications only in English, that can alienate your parent base. So obviously, one way to resolve that is to use AI to help you translate. And I think we talked about that in a previous episode, where AI can be a help for you if if you feel comfortable going that route, and if you don't have the resources available to you in your classroom or in your school to help with translation. What have you ever had? What else have you done? I know that you have taught in schools where there are a lot of different languages being spoken at home.
Yeah. So one of the things that several of the schools that I worked at were really good about were having language classes for the families. So both students and the parents, caregivers, could come in so they can learn some of the academic language. We're not teaching how to do math or how to help with homework, but they're teaching some of the basic communication language to help build that. And especially when you're at a school with multiple languages, the parents can start building that community and learn from each other. So maybe one family might be a little bit more able to communicate in English. They can then help another family. But another thing I think is extremely important, sometimes when it seems like too much work to request a translator, sometimes we put it on the students to translate. And I strongly am against that.
That's a mistake.
That's huge.
It's a mistake in so many ways, because if your messaging is positive, then you're creating a really strange dynamic, right? So like even if there's no bad news, right? Even if it's good news, the dynamic becomes almost the child in a parent's spot.
Right.
And that's not really very healthy for the child. And if the communication is asking for some student growth, we don't have to call it negative.
Right.
sometimes that communication does not make its way through the way that we expect it to.
Absolutely. And so then what is the point of that? So putting students in those roles, whether it's that same child or even an older sibling, it's not their responsibility. We need to be able to communicate face to face and collaborate directly with the parents. Now, if it's through an adult translator, phenomenal. And I'm going to go out on a limb to say that there's no reason why a translator cannot be provided. Now, it may be over the phone. It may be a little bit, you have to schedule out. But
absolutely. Or there's, you can, again, figure out a way to get that information down in text, get it checked over in as timely a manner as you can, and then distribute that information, knowing that you're not relying on a student and you've hopefully done your due diligence. Sometimes I'll also say, if it's just the translation is not going to happen and you've got to get this communication across as immediately as possible, like you may be able to do a FaceTime, you may be able to do a Zoom. And sometimes just the act of like attempting communication and showing a screenshot can be enough to be like, okay, I get what you're trying to tell me. I recognize that you don't speak my language, but I appreciate that you are doing your best to get the message to me, because there's nothing worse than ignoring an issue or ignoring a student who has been doing fantastic work because you can't communicate with their parents. It's just not fair.
It's not. There was another thing that I was starting to think about, and I'm going to say something that might sound a bit harsh. So listen to what I have to say first before you start judging me. But we need to remember that parents are not our friends. Okay, parents are clients of ours. Schools are businesses. And we need to work with communities, but they're not our families. That doesn't mean that they're not going to become great friends later, but we need to remember that we have priorities as a teacher. Parents have priorities as well. And if a parent feels that their child is unfairly being treated or there's an issue, we need to be able to work with them, and we can't rely on friendship to get us through that. I mean, I'm gonna say it. If I, as a parent, feel like my child is not being fairly treated, I'm not even going to say that I'm going to do it, but a parent might throw you under the bus. And I've been thrown under the bus really fast when their priority is taking care of their child. And that is completely fair of them, because this is how I feel as a parent. I want to see my child succeed. I want to see, just like I want to see my students succeed, I want to see everyone succeed. Sometimes I'm going to feel like the teacher is that barrier. And so parents are going to feel like I am the barrier to their child succeeding.
For sure.
And no longer, even if we're hanging out on the softball field together, no longer are we besties. So we have to go in thinking, this is a business relationship. Now, I have made amazing friendships with my parents and my students, who some are in their 30s and teachers as well. But I've made great friendships. But that year that you're teaching them, they are only obligated to work with you 1 year. You are only obligated to work with that child 1 year. And so we need to take away the feeling and the emotion of it, which also helps the parents see, I'm not going to give your child favoritism because we're on dance team together. I am going to treat your child equally to all the other students. And then, sometimes it's going to be really hard. I mean, especially if you as a parent, you as a teacher feel like you're being thrown under the bus for something that was unfair or didn't happen or whatever. I mean, I know, especially the younger you get, sometimes the messages that go home are a little bit different from what happened actually in the classroom.
Right.
Because they're driven by emotion. Children are driven by emotion, right? And so if they feel unfairly treated, like you didn't say that their outfit was nice today, then you clearly hate them. And that's what comes home. My teacher was not nice to me today, and she didn't like what I had to wear, or what she didn't like what I have to say. When I didn't make a comment either way because I didn't notice there was something different.
Totally. And what I'm hearing is, and I can relate to this because as a former educator, I can recognize that there might be two stories to be told.
Yeah.
But the majority of our parents are only getting classroom situations from one line of information, right? Like it's only one-sided, and it's really easy to side with the one that you hear the most. And so if you don't have a parent who recognizes there could be two sides to this story, it's a situation of recognizing that you are doing what you believe is right for the student, but you also need to recognize that a parent has the job to come in and have a conversation when they're hearing something that deviates from what they expect
Right.
to come from what's happening at school.
And
right?
doesn't that happen so much when children are going into middle school? I feel like personalities change. And I will just start from my own child. Love him to death. But going from elementary to middle school, there's been such a personality change.
That teacher just doesn't like me.
Right.
Right? I
Right.
mean, I can't even tell you how many times I've heard that. Oh, that
Right.
teacher just doesn't like me. That's why I have a D.
Or I turned in the assignment. I turned it in. She must have lost it.
Yep. Right.
So, and they're not trying to lie to us, but even the best child will tell a tale, will tell a story, because again, they're trying to battle the perception that we are going to hate them. And of course, they want their parents to love them. And so they're going to say whatever it takes to not get in trouble, even the best child.
Absolutely.
And believe it or not, as we start balancing those social and academic pressures, sometimes it gets too much. And sometimes hormones flood their brain and they become forgetful. And that child who has never missed an assignment now starts to forget to turn in work, or now starts to space out during class and really has no idea how to do that math problem because the teacher didn't teach it. The teacher taught it, but they were not
there.
Right.
They were not there in their mind when
Right.
that was occurring.
So I always try to bring that to the situation when I'm thinking about my children's teachers, exactly the same that I would have wanted, or I do want from my parents, to say, okay, my child was a straight A student last year. Now my child is getting C's and D's. That may not be the teacher's fault. What can we do together? This is a reality. Is it a matter of, does my child need some organization skills? Does my child need some coping skills? What does my child need? Because the reality is we're both working together for the same child. So if we start that combative relationship of it's all your fault, and same with teachers to parents, it's not always the parent's fault.
And this is why just keeping an open line of communication, right? Like making sure that when you notice something is off, you are jumping on that opportunity to reach out, or you're sending home newsletters just to let teacher or parents know, here's what's happening in our class. Check with your child and see if this is what's going on in their own minds, because this is what we're all doing, right? And like you said, even the best students can fall off the wagon and need, a reminder and some support to pull it back together. And when you form positive parent-teacher communications, that really helps move things along.
Right.
So lastly, let's talk about one other super important piece of collaboration in a school, and that is between students and peers. So this is totally different because this is more about teachers working with students to help them work together, right? But it's still collaboration, and it's still something that helps our communities to grow and improve over time. For me, I was super intentional about setting up my desks in ways that could quickly allow for multiple different ways to sit within the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So when I needed students in rows and focused and, looking at the board or, preparing for an assessment, I had them ready in rows, but I was thoughtful about making sure that everything was like even numbers so that I could quickly switch into a 4-person group just by turning and scooting, right? And so if you've got desks in your classroom and not tables, if you're in middle school, high school, you're going to be working in desks, but sometimes in elementary as well. Just being thoughtful about the classroom setting to initiate collaboration, I think is key. And of course, if you're working with tables, that makes it all the easier for collaboration because you're going to be sitting students in a way that allows for that collaboration. We can talk about seating assignments till forever because you want to be intentional with that as well. But, maybe you have today is an A-day seating assignment, so you need to go to your A seat. And that means that you're going to be working with homogenous groups, right? And then B-Day is something where you're sorting it up a little bit to have peer support within the groups. That's super simple. That's something that I think is pretty normalized in schools. But, it's really key to remember that your classroom setting is the first place to start when thinking about how you're going to have students collaborate.
I think also we need to think about the fact that you don't have to be friends in order to collaborate.
Oh my goodness. And I think sometimes putting friends together doesn't always work collaboratively very well. Right?
As much as they want. I mean, how many times do they say they want to work with their friend, but then when it happens, they're like, oh, wait, they don't have the same work ethic, or we're not on the same page with things because we have friendships because you're really good at jumping rope, but not necessarily because we both enjoy the same reading topics together. And so we really can't dialogue together. We have different sorts of friends. And so as teachers, we are still facilitating that collaboration. And so we need to teach them how we can coexist. And in the building, we're not going to be best friends with every single person because we just don't interact with every single person. But we can still work together. And if we're put in a group together at a staff meeting, then we can still work and be productive and follow the instructions because we're taking away that emotion a lot of times. And a lot of this requires us to teach the students, because this is not a natural thing, but to teach the students how to agree and disagree and how to take turns in conversation.
So learning discourse strategies, how to have academic, meaningful conversation. And that doesn't mean you've got to use fancy words. It just means what are some of those phrases that get you started, right? When you disagree, how do you disagree in a way that doesn't make you a troll, right? When you don't like what somebody is saying, you don't say, well, that was stupid.
Right.
Right? Oh my God, what are you thinking?
Or you're just being a Karen.
Right.
I mean, we're so used to, even in the adult world, we're so used to hearing attacks and insults for people having disagreements or differing opinions. And we need to model that as adults. But we need to teach students how to say, it's okay if you have a different opinion from me. We still have a common goal. So you may not like adventure books, but we need to choose a book that we're both going to like. I like history, you like adventure. So how can we work together and how can we use some of both of our interests to make sure that we're still not one person is taking all of the responsibility or one person feels completely offended because they're not being heard. So talking to each other and listening to each other listening to each other and making sure that we're being heard. So that way we can work together. So again, the classroom is a business. We have jobs to do. We have to pull our weight, but we also have to work together and figure out those conflicts. But that's our job as teachers, is to train the students on how to do that.
I think it's super important to recognize that these are spaces where we can guide our students. We don't necessarily have to choose who they're going to be working with every time, but we can guide them to say, listen, here's what we're doing. Think about what you can bring to a partnership or to a group, and then see if you can find group members that might appreciate or be able to use some of the skills that you can bring to your group. What are the things that you need help with? What are you not great at and that you know you're going to need to do with this piece of work or this project or this assignment? Who in this classroom can help you with that, right? So not only are we talking about discourse, but we're talking about helping students think about their learning and their needs as learners to better choose their groups.
And isn't that how we started the conversation, talking about PLCs and admitting areas that you need help in and getting input from our peers, whether your group is chosen for you or you've chosen your group? So it seems like what the skills are we're teaching in the students in student collaboration are the same things that we need in parent collaboration and the same thing that we need in our own PLCs.
It really is just an iterative learning process where we are doing the same things with different people.
Different ages.
Yep.
But it's all the same.
It makes things easier when we think about it like that, right?
Absolutely.
I love it. Well, I want to thank you all for listening to Education Uncharted, a Propello podcast with us today. Please hit that subscribe button and make sure that you never miss an episode. If you like what we shared today, we would love to hear from you. What do we want to hear from people after this conversation?
I would love to hear about how you make your PLCs work. How do you promote that discourse? How do you promote that community with your families, with your students? What are you doing in your classrooms that's making it work? Or what are you not doing, or where do you need help? Let's have our comment section be a PLC.
Let's do it. Let's share what we need and what we know, and let's match each other up to really start learning from each other and growing so that we can all walk away from these communities feeling invigorated and ready to try something new.
So until next time,
I'm Amanda.
And I'm Lisa.